How do you feel about the advice fake it until you make it? Do you think applying it has caused you to level up, or has it caused you to feel more disconnected to the goal you're currently working on? While you have a moment of reflection, I'm going to take the time to introduce myself. Hi, my name is Leja, but you can call me Lay. Welcome back to A Little Atypical, where we dive into all things wellness, personal development, and lifestyle topics. I like to approach the typical topics from a not so typical perspective, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. So if you listened to last week's episode, it was all about breaking the elements of a rebrand down so you can focus on the execution to go from concept mode to execution. I'm biased, so I think you should listen to the whole thing, but I do want to build more on 2 points I made. So in last week's episode, I discussed how the pursuit of being quote unquote real can sometimes be oversimplified. We all naturally present different facets of ourselves depending on the context, whether with family, colleagues, or friends. And doing so isn't fakeness, it's social awareness. Then another point I mentioned was that behavior change is often the most uncomfortable part of rebranding because so many people lean on the fake it until you make it advice to the point where it feels like a constant performance. So I wanted to explore that idea more. Obviously, if that advice has worked for you, I'm genuinely happy you found something you can deeply resonate with, but I wanted to share why that possibly won't work for everyone. So upon my research, I found these reasons to be the most common examples for why fake it until you make it tends to fail some people. So reason number one is a lack of authenticity and internal conflict. So when people rely on the fake it until you make it advice, they often fail to recognize that social awareness, adjusting how you present yourself based on context, is actually a valuable skill and not a performance. Instead, they internalize the belief that adapting their behavior is inherently dishonest or inauthentic. And this goes into the fact where authenticity is so pushed. I remember when I was in school, that is what we were talking about, in terms of social media and branding and stuff like that, that the idea of authenticity is always pushed. But then it kind of creates this conflict of what is actually authentic versus what isn't authentic, you know? And in terms of personal rebranding, this creates an intense internal conflict because then they feel pressure to appear competent and confident in every situation, and yet simultaneously worried that they're being fake or deceptive. And the constant mental gymnastics of trying to act the part while battling feelings of being like a fraud becomes very exhausting. And rather than building genuine confidence, this approach can kind of deepen the sense of disconnection from who they truly are and what they're working towards. Reason number two, it forces you to focus on the external validation. So it often prioritizes how other people perceive you over how you actually feel or what you genuinely need to develop. The approach encourages people to perform confidence or competence primarily to gain approval, recognition, or acceptance from others. And I'm not saying there's anything inherently wrong with those things, but as a result, success becomes measured by external reactions such as praise, promotions, or social validation rather than internal growth or mastering a skill. And this reliance on outside feedback can create a cycle where self-worth becomes dependent on maintaining the facade, which makes it difficult to acknowledge the gaps in knowledge or even ask for help. And ultimately, when external validation is the primary driver, people may achieve surface level success while also feeling increasingly disconnected from who they actually are and what their capabilities are. And the third reason that I wanted to highlight was it kind of just overall reinforces imposter syndrome because by creating a persistent gap between how you appear externally versus how you feel internally, when you're constantly performing confidence you don't genuinely possess, Every success feels unearned or accidental rather than a reflection of growth. And this approach kind of teaches you to attribute all your achievements to your ability to be that version, the fake version of you, and your abilities to deceive others rather than developing actual skills and knowledge. And the longer you maintain the facade, the more you fear being quote unquote found out, which also intensifies the feelings of fraudulence and inadequacy. And ultimately, instead of building authentic confidence through what you learn and what you experience, you're training yourself to believe that your success is based on an act, making imposter syndrome kind of like a self fulfilling prophecy. Last year, I talked a lot about this, like authentic confidence, when I did my 24 lessons I learned in 2024 episode. And that was one of the things I brought up because it is something I feel very passionate about. As someone who was constantly put down a lot, especially at a young age for such a long period of time, I know how hard it is to unlearn the insecurity that was kind of installed in you. I think when some people do fake it, quote unquote, fake it till you make it, internally it provides a form of escapism, not because they don't possess the qualities to be who they want to be, but that it's truly hard for them to see themselves that way. So they kind of have to make up a persona because they internalized the belief that their true self isn't enough. And overall, this becomes just a painful cycle. The persona becomes a shield trying to protect themselves from facing the deep belief that they are inadequate as they are. But the problem is, when you're constantly performing, you never give yourself the chance to build real evidence that contradicts those old beliefs. Every success gets attributed to the character you're playing, not your actual capabilities, which means the insecurity never actually gets addressed. While I'm saying this, I also want to add that performing isn't always a conscious choice. In today's world, it's kind of more of a survival instinct, a reflex response when we feel pressure to prove ourselves or when we fall into people-pleasing patterns. So let me tell you a story from last month. So as you guys know, I was so excited for the events I was going to, and I was supposed to go to this 2-day event, but after going the first day, I was so socially depleted from trying to interact with people that I just ended up skipping the second day. And the thing is, I really wanted to go both days this year because last year in 2024, when I tried to go the first day, I ended up having a panic attack and I didn't go until the second day. This year, I actually went to day one because I had enough self-assurance that I belonged there because of the work I did this year. But once I got there, I barely knew how to talk to people there because it was kind of hard to find people with more of the roles I was interested in. I feel like there were more people on the supplier slash manufacturer side of things, and my ideal roles are more involved with strategy, insights, analytics, specifically more so involving people and trends. So I personally loved watching the presentations because many of them spoke to trends and research, but when people weren't doing the presentations, there wasn't anything to do but walk around and talk to different people at the booths. And it was difficult knowing how to navigate conversations. And on top of that, I was alone. So if you go within a group, it actually is a lot less intimidating. But anyways, when I was supposed to go day 2, I ended up just staying home and reflecting because I didn't feel like I was experiencing a panic attack, but I just felt really uneasy going. And since my mom always instilled in me that I have to trust my mind, I knew I just had to trust my instincts that day. But that didn't stop me from feeling initially annoyed with myself because in my head, it was like, I'm supposed to be doing everything I can, and this year I'm supposed to be different. So once I got over what I felt about myself, my next thought was, okay, so what caused you to feel like the conversations were so bad that you just can't bring yourself to show up that day? This is why I tell y'all, when you journal, as good as it is to have more positive entries and to speak things into existence by saying those things are already done, blah, blah, blah. When you do that all the time, you kind of miss out on having breakthrough, aha type moments that can kind of change your outlooks and beliefs. So I realized I did have good interactions before entering. I literally met a brand founder who also spoke at the first event I went to in September, and she was just so kind. But as soon as I entered where everything was set up, I felt like I had to appear more professional because even though I looked the part, I still had this huge thought of, I'm here at this event and I still haven't got enough experience in this industry yet, which is such an unfair thing to think because not everyone there was even a professional in the industry. Some were there as aspiring founders, some were there as students, and it just sucks because sometimes we do create these limits and standards for ourselves and we just end up performing. I felt like if I just focused on the aspects of my identity that do align with who I was becoming, I would have just been embodying and reflecting those traits instead of performing in a way that then stagnated me later. And I wanted to tell this story because it formed a whole new outlook for me. Like, I always plan what I want to talk about in the sense of titles, but sometimes I don't know how to further explain like the thought process I'm having about that thing. But this was one of those life experiences moments that kind of filled in the blanks for me. We don't need to perform because a lot of times we have the traits for who we are becoming that are just seedlings that need to be nurtured to evolve into that identity. Let's say you want to have a more leadership role, but you never had been in a position to be a leader. You may not know exactly how to lead, but there's still proof that you can grow into an amazing one, right? Do you have people who always turn to you for advice? That means people do trust your opinions / insights. Are you someone who naturally notices when people are struggling and you offer support? That demonstrates empathy and emotional intelligence, which are core leadership qualities. Do you take initiative on projects or tasks without being asked? That shows ownership, proactive thinking, i.e., things essential for leadership roles. Have you ever mediated conflicts or helped people try to find common ground? That shows your ability to navigate group dynamics and create collaboration among different personality types and people who may think differently, process things differently. And overall, do you stay calm under pressure or help others stay focused during stressful situations? That indicates the kind of steady presence that is effective for leaders. That's just one example. A lot of times we brush off traits we already have because they don't fall perfectly in line with who we're supposed to be, or because someone once framed those qualities as flaws rather than strengths. And when we fail to see how these existing parts of ourselves are actually the foundation for the identities we're building towards, the key isn't to be someone entirely new. It's to recognize what's already there and to grow into it. For example, I am an overthinker, and this could be looked at as a bad thing, but with the right tools, it can also be looked at as being considerate. Being someone who is so tapped into human nature that they can see how different people may perceive the same thing. Being someone who can see things in multiple ways also allows for calculated risk, which is so needed as a woman aiming for my desired role. I'm also a curious person, which lays the groundwork for research and learning. It's so easy for me to have the desire for those things. If I'm able to put that research into something like an article, podcast, or video to express an idea or a thought, then by extension, that would make me a creative, a writer, an author, etc., depending on the context, of course. But the bridge between curiosity and creation, those things are very much intertwined. And I can be seen as a quiet person, which some may mistake for being disengaged, when in reality, I'm observing and collecting stories, exactly what I did above. Being observant means I naturally pick up on patterns in communication, motivation, and subtle cues that reveal true preferences and pain points, Like while others talk, I'm just noticing the language people use, the emotions behind their choices, the gaps between what they say and what they do. And this ability to listen deeply and observe carefully is foundational for things like insights or just understanding like audiences and identifying trends or developing strategies based on human behavior, whatever. It's all needed. And even though to some people it does have a negative connotation, it can also have better ones. And I'm just using some of my known traits to get my point across. But this applies to you as a listener as well, because sometimes as people, we have that underlying trait, but we just don't know how to connect it to who we are in progress of becoming because how people have used it. Like, are you really a nosy person, or are you actually a curious person who just happens to be interested in human interactions? I think what most people tend to forget is traits are a double-edged sword, and traits that are believed to have positive connotations can still have a negative reflection, and vice versa. And why this matters in this conversation is because the traits you have can be nurtured to be in a positive way, so you don't have to feel like you're performing, you just need to embody. I think what people really need, instead of fake it until you make it, is permission to be a work in progress. So what does embodying actually mean in the context of your personal rebrand? Embodying means you're not pretending to be someone you're not. You're intentionally practicing and living into the traits you already possess in a way that aligns with who you're becoming. It's the difference between putting on a costume and growing into your own skin. When you embody something, you're working with your existing foundation instead of putting on this elaborate facade. Think of it this way. Performing is when you're collaborating on a project and you pretend to understand everything being discussed because you're afraid asking questions will make you look incompetent. Embodying is when you recognize that your tendency to think things through carefully is actually valuable. So you speak up to ask clarifying questions that often help the whole group gain a better understanding. You're not faking your expertise, you're honoring your way of processing information while intentionally contributing to the shared goal. You're essentially saying, these are the parts of me that already exist. Now I'm going to nurture them, refine them, and direct them with intention towards who I'm becoming. You're not creating a character, you're cultivating yourself. And what this can also look like in practice is you're acknowledging what's already there. So instead of thinking I need to become confident, you recognize like I'm confident in XYZ areas. When I'm talking about these specific topics, when I'm helping a friend, when I'm doing research. And those are real things to be confident about. They're just not applied to every context yet. You also give yourself permission to be developing, which means you could say things like, I'm learning this, or I'm growing in this area, without feeling like a fraud. You don't have to pretend you know everything. You just need to show up as someone who is actively developing. You also practice your traits in new contexts. You speak from your actual experiences, like when someone asks about your work or your interests, you share you're genuinely learning, creating, exploring, rather than inflating your experiences or borrowing someone else's perspective to sound more impressive. You also honor your energy and your boundaries. The beautiful thing about embodying, instead of faking it until you make it, is that it just creates this feedback loop of real confidence, authentic confidence. Every time you show up as yourself, even your developing imperfect self, things go well. You build real evidence that you are capable, not just the character you are playing. The wins become yours. The growth becomes something you can actually feel and measure. This is why I say you don't need to perform, because I truly believe you need to embody. You need to give yourself permission to be exactly where you are while actively growing towards where you want to be, without pretending you're already there or abandoning who you are in the process. Your rebrand is not about becoming someone else. This is where I tend to disagree with certain wellness beliefs that you have to basically get rid of your old self, kill your old self, whatever, that you have to completely get rid of your old self to be someone new. Because the thing is, your old self carried you to this point. Your old self discovered these new methods that you're going to use, And I'm just a believer that you don't have to hate on one version of you to become another. You can just say, like, that version doesn't serve you anymore, but you don't have to actively hate it, like, as if it's not the one that discovered all these new things that you are working towards. So that is all for today and the end of our little micro rebranding series. If you want to listen to more episodes that highlight the rebrand, personal rebranding things, check out episodes 60 and 62 if you haven't already. I am hopefully doing one more episode for this month and then doing a bonus episode in November, because I know in December I would like to take a break. So I'll only do one episode that month. So with that mini update being said, it's time for what I'm grateful for and for the card pull of the episode. So for what I'm grateful for, I have a lot to choose from, but I think in general, I would say October has been a really productive month, and I do credit it to having someone that helps me be more accountable with my goals. And I'll be honest, I never loved the idea of accountability buddies, only because it's hard for me to believe someone would care as much as I do. But having someone who is on the same wavelength and who isn't flaky really does help. And now it's time for the card pull. If this is where you usually click off because card readings are not your thing or not something you personally align with, but still like other aspects of my content, thank you for listening this far. And be sure to come back for next week's episode and to follow the podcast to remain updated about new releases. Depending on the platform, if you're on YouTube, subscribe. If you're on other podcasting sites, follow along. And so for this episode, I am using the Moonology deck, and the card we received is Full Moon, Surrender to the Divine. The very word climax brings all sort of ideas and images to mind, agreed? But it really is the feeling of this card. Life is coming to a head, a point, a conclusion, or a turning point. There may be some kind of change and possibly even some sort of emotional explosion. Tune into your emotions now and see what they're telling you. They're very likely close to the surface, no matter when in the moon cycle you've pulled this card. Matters will soon conclude, and you'll find out whether or not your wishes are going to come true. The odds are in your favor, as this is a positive card, but you need to work harder than usual to keep cool as events unfold. Attuned to the moon. I am getting the answers I need. Additional meanings for this card. A wish you made may be about to come true. It's make or break time. There could be a sense of madness in the air. Breathe deep and stay calm. You may need to forgive someone to release negative energy. It's time to let go of the past and move on. The teaching. Full moon marks the climax of the lunar cycle, making this card something of a power card. The full moon is often the time when answers are given to questions asked during the new moon, and pulling this card at any time in the lunar cycle suggests answers will be coming your way before too long. So, this full moon card perfectly mirrors the episode's central theme, that you're at a turning point where pretending and performing no longer serves you, and it's time to let those facades reach their natural conclusion. The card's message to surrender to the divine and trust that answers are coming aligns with giving yourself permission to stop faking it and instead embody who you're authentically becoming, even if that means releasing the exhausting performance you've been maintaining. Just as the full moon reveals what's been hidden and brings matter to a head, this personal rebrand is about allowing your true self to emerge fully rather than staying stuck in the make or break cycle of constant performance. So, thank you for tuning into today's episode of A Little Atypical. If you found this helpful, don't forget to subscribe and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Remember to view the description box where you can find important links such as the one to my website, where there is so much more bonus content. Until next time, have a good day, evening, or night, and stay authentically atypical. Okay, bye!